they then and we are recording. And yeah, I'm a digital campaigner at Stand.earth with the forest team, and I am calling in from the unceded lands of the Hupatchesat and Sishat nations in so-called Port Alberni. Angeline?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Angeline Robertson, Senior Investigative Researcher with the Stand Research Group. I also use she, her pronouns. And I am calling in from the unceded territory of the Shishalt Nation on the Sunshine Coast.
Great. Thank you so much, team. And please feel free, thanks to everyone who's already introducing themselves in the chat. Please also feel free to tell us your name, your pronouns, whose territory you're calling from, and anything else you'd like us to know. And I just want to start off in a good way. So I mentioned I'm calling in from Sinaiax territories, where I'm calling in from to really be grounded and encourage you all to be grounded in the same way is somewhere that's been deeply impacted by resource extraction over many years. I'm near the confluence of the Kootenai and Columbia rivers, a place that's been impacted by mines and dams and forestry, but is still incredibly beautiful and has been stewarded and kept by Sinaiax and has been used by many other nations as important waterways since time immemorial. And so as we go through this presentation, which is really about having information and having tools to be able to defend lands and stand together in community for each other, for our shared rights, and also, for a better future, just encourage you all to get grounded and think about where you are, what these tools mean, and what this information about logging and forests mean to where you are, and how we can all, strive to be in better relation with the land and also the first people who have stewarded and kept these lands since time immemorial. So hope you're all doing that work. We have a link here. If you're not sure where you are, you can get started there. It's not entirely accurate, so I encourage you to look for more local sources and do that work however it is most meaningful to you. And on a more logistics note, we are going to be taking and moderating questions throughout this presentation. We will take clarifying questions as we go, but also we'll be moderating questions and saving them for later if we think they'll be answered later, or trying to kind of prioritize questions or group them together for time. So please feel free to ask questions as we go, especially if you're not clear on something that we've just discussed. So we'll get right into it. So why are we here? A little context setting on the next slide. So obviously there's been many, many generations of work, many decades of industrial logging, but it's taken until very recently for this British Columbia government to really recognize the dire straits we're in terms of old growth and in terms of the health and management of forests. And so in September 2020, the province, the BC NDP government released an old growth strategic review with 14 recommendations. It was part of a election promise to fully implement these commitments on a 3-year timeline, which is coming right up in September of this year. And in the first 6 months, the province's commitment was to take immediate action for high-risk ecosystems, which has come to be known as deferrals, which we'll talk about in a sec, and also to fully involve First Nations and Indigenous people on every step of the way. So we have yet to see a full completion of any one of the 14 recommendations. And at the same time, if you go to the next slide, what we are seeing is continued logging in the most at-risk old growth forests, places that were mapped as needing to be set aside from logging because of the rarity of the old growth, the high ecosystem risk. And we've seen the province repeatedly try to kind of sell the public on their efforts around what they are doing on old growth. And continuously, we've had to, with partners and with many, many other groups and many folks taking action on the ground, taking action in their communities, we've had to call the province out and ask them for more transparency. And you can only ask so many times before you have to do something. Next slide. So we've seen these promises be reiterated time and again by this government. So when Premier Eby took office, he again reiterated the commitment. He said specifically in November of 2022, you will see an acceleration of our old growth plan. Well, what we have seen since Eby made that promise was we've seen at least, upwards of 1,400 hectares of the most at-risk old growth logged, places that were marked for deferral. And so we're still seeing the irreplaceable loss of these ecosystems. Next slide. And the province has been releasing some numbers about what does it mean, how many, old growth forests that have been marked for deferral have been logged. They've been telling us in hectares, but not telling us where those forests are, what type of forests they are, why they were logged. We also don't know, in some cases, whether or not nations had the opportunity to be consulted. We're taking a lot on faith, and unfortunately, this province hasn't demonstrated a good faith commitment to their commitments on old growth. So, next slide. So why Forest Eye? Well, this is really about transparency and data equity. It is about taking information that up until this point has been really difficult for people to access, has been mostly accessible only for government and industry, and it's about putting that information into your hands, into the hands of communities, into the hands of the public, and removing barriers for you to take action. And it's about having a clear understanding of what's at stake for the future. And so I'm sure none of you need to be reminded, we're in the midst of crisis after crisis. These are photos from 2021. We know that the logging practices that are still being pursued in this province lead to worse floods, worse fires, and slides that have all been also made worse by climate change. And so really what we're talking about is in the backdrop of the very real things that many of you could be facing in your communities with, another record-breaking fire season here in so-called British Columbia. So under all of these key contexts, we decided that we needed to build a tool and make it available to you. And today is about teaching you how to use that tool. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Angeline, who's the lead researcher on this project.
Thank you, Tegan. If we can move on to the next slide. So I'm here to sort of tell you a little bit more about how Forest Eye works. Tegan's giving you context. I'll give you the technical elements of it, and then Desiree will walk us through how to engage. So Forest Eye employs software tools, including remote sensing, satellite imagery, and GIS mapping, that's based on spatial data on forest harvesting permits and old growth forest areas that are mapped and downloaded from the BC government data catalog. So we use BC government data as the only source of information for Forest Eye. And there are 5 elements to the tool. First, we have a subscription to Upstream Tech's lens detection software. And this is software that uses remote sensing to detect vegetation drop in areas of interest that we've identified that lets us know there's a possibility that the forest in that area has been cleared. Those areas of interest relate to the overlap between old growth forests and active and pending forest harvesting permits per the latest map that we received from the BC government data catalog. We then, when we receive an alert from Lens, and I'll show you, well, actually, I'll walk you through, I'll just give you sort of an example in a second. But when we receive an alert from Lens, we use Planet Labs daily and monthly satellite imagery to confirm that the alert represents a true veg drop and to confirm what caused the vegetation drop. So was it a forest clearance from logging, or was there a natural disturbance such as fire or wind throw? Then we also can collect images and use those to create time-lapse videos and before and after images to help highlight what has happened and show evidence of the forest harvesting that's occurred. We also use ArcGIS to especially look at metadata. So who has holding the permit for the forest area that was cleared? What kind of ecological zone were they in, or biogeoclimatic zone, if you're an ecologist like me, and also to do a very specific area analysis to calculate what was the area of forest loss and what kind of old growth was lost. We then have our own bespoke internal and in-house database that we have built here at Stand Research Group, where we pull all of that data collection into a database and categorize all of the data, and also create a library and archive of all the alerts and all the imagery that goes with them. And then that's all pushed out to the Forest Eye website, which is hosted by Stand.earth. And the major interface there is the interactive map of geolocated alerts with their carousel of images that go with them. And those are only the alerts that we have confirmed are actually forest clearances. We have maybe about 20 to 30% of the alerts that come in that actually are just dismissed. So we really take a lot of time and care in manually screening all the alerts to make sure that we're not pushing through something that isn't confirmed. Now, I mentioned old growth, and I just wanted to touch on this, something that that Tegan talked about in her introduction about deferrals, which is a word that gets passed around a lot these days. I wanted to really highlight that Forest Eye generates alerts for old growth forests that are mapped by the Technical Advisory Panel. And we use two specific maps, which you can access on the BC government database for the old growth Technical Advisory Panel. Map 1, which is priority deferral areas, or those deferrals and candidate deferrals that have been talked about a lot in the news. And Map 8, which is actually a map that includes all those deferrals, but also all the other areas of old growth forest mapped around the province. And Forest Eye only looks at those areas in those two maps that overlap with government maps of the active and pending forest harvesting permits. And this is all current as of February 2023 and will be updated periodically. We only look at planned harvest dates between 2020 and 2030. And we also have a few other criteria for screening out things in that map that don't actually speak to what we're doing. Things like big recreational permits and stuff like that. So both maps are included in Forest Eye because we understand that deferrals areas are in a state of flux. The province has removed some, they've approved some, they've let some get logged, and they've replaced some. But we don't have a map of all these changes, and we've asked for those, but so far the only way that we can ensure that Forest Eye can continue to track logging across old growth areas in the province is to cover all of the old growth areas that could possibly be included as deferrals. So as well as deferrals, we use that Map 8 old growth, and that's really showing both those areas that are outside of protected areas and are at high and near-term risk and should have harvest deferred, and that bigger old growth map that all of those deferrals have come from. So what does Lens look like? This is a screenshot. It shows the outline of a clear-cut area with a before and after slider. We collect all of our data in these notes. We are very meticulous about making sure we're grabbing all the information that we need. And we also want to grab the best imagery that we can. So we go through, months and months of imagery to pull out and get a really good sense of the timing where logging has occurred. We use Planet daily and monthly imagery. Here's a daily scenes image, and you can see that same cut block here outlined, and we can go through almost near daily imagery. Obviously, with cloud cover and things like that, we have days where we don't have pictures. Oh, I think we're really far ahead on the slides. One more back, one more forward. Yes. Sorry, I should be saying that we should be moving along on the slides. So for planet imagery, you can see that the same cut block is outlined, and you can see along the left-hand side that we have opportunity to look at this image almost daily. And then on the next slide, we have the old growth layers from the BC data catalog in our own in-house GIS analysis. And that allows us to look at metadata, like I said, things like the company name, the CUPLOC ID, the biogeoclimatic zone that this is in, and pull all of that into Lens to really build out a picture of what this forest area is like. Next slide. And then this is our bespoke database. This is where sort of everything comes together and we interact with the campaign and the website in order to push out those confirmed alerts. And I'm going to see if this is going to work, but the next slide gives you this is a time-lapse video that we create when we screen alerts that allows us to put together all of the images to show the logging as it occurs. I don't know if it's going to work to click on that and everybody can view it. And press. So we see the date is in the right top-hand corner. And this allows you to see as it happened from when the forest was forested to road building to clearance. And now I'm going to pass it over to Desiree to talk a little bit more about how you can interact with this tool. Unless there's been any clarifying questions that I've missed. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I haven't seen any clarifying questions come through the Q&A. I just put it in the chat, but if folks don't know where to find that, it should be on the bottom bar of your Zoom with the 3 dots that says more. But I'll also just see if we can open up the chat so that if folks can't find the Q&A function, then they can also just ask their questions in the chat. Great. I'm going to jump in a second here. So Angeline mentioned already that we have this powerful new website that is publicly accessible for anyone to use. And we tried to make the user journey as streamlined as possible. But a lot of this is new for us. We're doing a lot of experiments digitally, so it'll get more refined as we move forward. And I just wanted to take a moment and take you folks over to the website to show how you can navigate it. But one thing before we do that, I just wanted to mention that something that's really cool about this site is you can actually navigate the alerts and search them specifically for the areas that you're interested in or companies that you're interested in. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Perfect. All right, so this is the landing page of the website here. And right as you get to the website, we have some key statistics here, as well as a place where you can subscribe if you haven't already. And then if you go to the alerts tab here, you will be able to search by keyword. So say, for example, I wanted to look up the areas that CAN4 has logged specifically. I could just type in CAN4 to the keyword search. And now you'll see that all of CAN4's alerts are popping up here. And then we can simply click to view the alert. And that will bring us to this specific alert and all of the information, the key information that we are able to provide at this time. So you can see the total area logged by hectares. You can see the total of old growth deferrals logged. And again, just to break that down, deferrals are a rare at-risk old growth forest that expert scientists mapped for immediate logging bans. So you can see in this specific example that what was logged, all that was logged was also a deferral. And then you can also see the type of tree that was logged. And then alongside that, we'll have Planet Labs imagery. Angeline just showed you an example already, but some of these will be time-lapse videos, and some of them will be the other imagery we have. And you have a list of companies that you can search by. I'm just going to remove this. So you can also use this drop-down menu to look through the companies. You can also use this drop-down menu to look through specific districts that you might be interested in. Or if you would like to look, you can look by dates of roads are logging or total hectares logged. And then I just want to take us back up to this little map here, and you can see that you can also navigate it by the map, which is pretty cool. So say you lived on Vancouver Island in a specific area close to Banfield, and you wanted to see what was happening around there. You could look at these little icons, and same as I just did, you can view the alert like that. So that's kind of how to navigate the alerts. I'm just going to check the Q&A. Yes, I see we have a couple questions here. Jackie, I will slow down. I don't know if that was for me or for when Angeline was talking. I see another question here. Do you ground validate some data captured by the satellite? Angeline, did you want to answer that now or save it for the end? Yeah, we'll save that one for the end. But I will slow down. Sorry, we have so much to fit in and we want to leave lots of time for Q&A. But hopefully that overview made sense. So just to recap, you can use this map here. I'm just going to zoom back out. So you can use this map here to look at different areas of the province. You have the zoom function just in the right-hand corner here. And so again, let's say you're in Terrace, you want to know what's going on near there. Here's an alert that you can then zoom into by clicking View Alert. So that's kind of the map function. And then we have the list function here again. So that's the search by keyword, which you can use, you know, companies, districts, etc. And then you can also use all of these drop-down menus, just to review. So that's a bit about how to navigate the alerts on the website. And then if you want to know more about kind of the methodology piece that Angeline was just speaking to, we have a page here that goes through the summary of methods. So there's lots more information you can refer back to. We also have like a common FAQ with kind of common questions that we've been receiving from folks in lead up to the launch. And then we also have a contact form. So if you have questions about anything, please feel free to use this. And then last but not least, on the website, we have a Get Alerts page where, again, you can subscribe if you haven't already. And so you can put your information here. And then to opt in to receive text message alerts, you just have to click on this little square at the bottom here. And then if you don't want text, just don't click that box. Otherwise, feel free to go for it, and you will get a weekly alert sent to your email and phone. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here and make sure I didn't miss any. Oh, it was for Angeline. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, Jackie, we'll come back to that question at the end there. Sorry, I couldn't see the chat while I was sharing my screen. Now that you've seen the website and how to operate it, and if you subscribe, you will essentially be able to receive weekly alerts, which to begin, it's going to be manual distribution. So we're only going to be sending out a batch of alerts once a week on Wednesdays. And the first one went out earlier this afternoon. and you can get that on email or text, and it'll feature, again, these powerful time-lapse videos that we've shown you folks a couple times now, as well as it will have links to our website for the specific alerts that we're featuring. And that was something I just wanted to be clear about. When we're sending out emails and text, we'll be featuring a few alerts or an alert. And then you can go and explore some of the more recent ones on that alerts tab that I was just showing you folks on the website. And you can go to the next slide, Michelle. We are planning a phase 2 of this project. And as I said, a lot of this has been very experimental for our organization. And so we are going to be refining a lot about the database, about the website, how to connect this to email and text and social media. And so for now, it will be more sparse, the alerts, but we're hoping to get to a place where these alerts will be more automated. And so that you'll be able to receive them as they're posted more close to real time. So again, subscribe if you have not already, if you want to receive those alerts. We can go to the next slide, Michelle. And then if you're not already following us on social media, as I just mentioned, we'll also be sharing weekly batches of alerts on our various platforms. I've included all the names of those platforms on this slide here. And most of them are Stand.earth. So you'll be able to find them after the fact if you don't have time to write this down. Yeah, you might see some videos with my old face telling you what you're seeing. So that will be coming out weekly as well. We can go to the next slide. And then finally, we wanted to explain a little bit more about how folks can use this to power their advocacy. So as Tegan mentioned, a huge barrier that we've been facing in this campaign thus far has been the government hiding behind misinformation and not providing the public with transparency and data equity. But now we have that to an extent with this new tool. And I know, and I just want to acknowledge, like, someone who's been also working on this for the last 3 years and on the shoulders of First Nations and communities who've been working on this issue for decades. It has been a disheartening thing to continuously come up against misinformation and not to see meaningful action at the scale and urgency required. And so we're really hoping that with this tool and with the irrefutable evidence that it provides, that folks can go back to their MLAs and show them that we have proof that the government has not upheld its promises and that old growth logging is ongoing. And what's more is you'll be able to point to like specific areas in forests that are close to home or important to you or important to relative communities. And so we're encouraging people to reach back out to their MLAs or reach out for the very first time. No, that can be an intimidating thing to do, but it has been truly like the most effective way we've been able to reach government and push for this on the inside. And so you can send them an email directly asking for a meeting. Some folks are still doing it on Zoom. Some folks are doing it on in person now. Tegan just shared a link in the chat of how to find your MLA's contact information if you don't already have it. So yeah, encouraging you to do that. And, the more meetings with MLAs, the better. So you can meet with them one-on-one, or if you're more comfortable, grab a pal and meet in a small group. Next slide, Michelle. And we also just created a new email tool so that you can easily send an email to key decision makers on this file. And so that is Premier Eby, Minister of Forests Ralton, and Minister of Water, Lands and Resource. Colin, and we'll be sharing a little link in the chat here, but you can do this after the fact. You can share this with your network, and basically we just want to send them a message that the whole world is literally watching them with this new tool now that we're actually able to see what is happening on the ground in forests across the province. Next slide. And we just wanted to highlight that since releasing this new tool, it's had quite a widespread media impact. And so we feel that we've successfully brought this issue back into the public eye, also via media. And as we said earlier, again, like this has been a huge barrier, and I think even journalists have been feeling that. And so having like this new angle and this renewed leverage to pressure the government is super helpful to make sure that the BC government fulfills its promise. So yeah, these are just a few of the headlines, and it's been picked up widely. So that is hopeful. And we can go to the next slide. And now we're gonna have a good amount of time for questions, which I will be moderating. So I'm just going to go back to Jackie's question. And the question, I think, was for Angeline. And Jackie was saying, I want to be able to interpret the images, what is logged and what not, and what is the white clouds, snow. I see, Angeline, you responded a bit in the chat, but maybe if you can just speak to that verbally as well.
Yeah, so the white that you see on the ground that's sort of within the outline of the cut block is snow. And the if you see the white coming across the screen quite high up covering, this is actually smoke in the image that's on the screen now. But you will have cloud cover as well. But when you see the white clearly like laying on within the boundaries of a cut block like this is here, that's snow. This is harvested in February 2023. And apologies for being quick on the slides. I wasn't giving proper cues to Michelle to flip through the slides, so that was my bad.
Thanks, Angeline. So I'm just going to go to the next Q&A. And there are a couple that have already been answered, but I see there is another one here. Is there a map that overlays MLA districts with the forest areas so we can focus on those in our discussions with them? Great question. Tegan?
Yeah.
Or Angeline?
Well, we could both talk about this. We actually did talk about this, and I think it's worth a bit of discussion. So there is a spatial layer for MLA districts. But the thing that happens, I think, and a lot of you might know, is that you might live in an area, like say I live in the Kootenays, and there's, 2, especially here, MLAs whose, sort of electoral districts overlap, but the areas that you're interested in might not belong to, it's a weird way to put it, your MLA. So we wanted to keep a general region because we figured people identify more with the regions that they care about more than their electoral districts when it comes to old growth forests that they're particularly attached to, especially if you're, say, in a place like an urban center where there's many overlapping boundaries. But then you get into like larger districts, especially in the interior and in the north, where that's maybe a little more applicable. So there was a difference in how that could be valuable to people across the province. So that's why when we talked about it, we decided not to include it over the other values like districts. Did I capture that right, Angeline? Does? Okay.
I think that was great. Angeline, do you have anything to add?
No, just on we use natural resource districts again, because we are using BC government data, and the metadata that comes with those maps is really focused on the natural resources, regions and districts, and landscape unit names, which maybe don't make a lot of sense beyond the people who are doing the mapping and working within the government, especially if you're adding landscape unit names that have not that great a reference to what people might experience or understand as landmarks on a landscape. But that's what we have. So we are working on how do we give people a better sense of where these areas are and what they're close to. And I think that looking at political districts, and maybe creating connections there is something we can explore down the road.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to another question, which Angeline, you answered via text, but just in case other folks have the same question, do you ground validate some data captured by the satellite?
Yeah, this is a great question and something we're really building out for Forest Eye. So in the meantime, we're very conservative about what we consider a confirmed alert. Like I said, between 20 and 30% of the alerts are just dismissed. Some of these are ones where we can't get good enough satellite imagery, unfortunately, because of the quality or cloud cover that exists for the timing. Others, because we can't quite make out what's going on. We're not quite sure what triggered the alert, but it isn't clear. We use 4-meter true color satellite imagery from Planet. We also have access to imagery, an archive that we can access when we can't quite make out on the 4-meter satellite imagery what we're looking at. But in the end of the day, without a ground truthing program completely in place, we have to err on the side of caution and not publish that alert. So it will be dismissed. But in the future, this is something where I see an opportunity for sort of citizen science, for people who want to go out and kind of are curious or already understand that things are happening on the landscape, want to use our tool and maybe need to do some ground truthing in order to really understand more fully what that picture is. And so I feel like it's a very important part of a long-term program here and something we're putting our eyes on.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to bring a question about sharing on social media after the launch. And I just wanted to let folks know that it has launched. We actually already launched on July 20th. And so this has been live in the world for a little bit now. And we did create an amplification package as well, which I just shared the link to in the chat. And that amplification package has links to all of our social media platforms. So if you don't want to make your own content, you can simply repost by following the links in that amplification package. It also has some graphics as well as some videos and screenshots of alerts that you can reshare, and some sample copy if you hate writing copy you can take from there. So I just wanted to emphasize that because I saw there was a question about that. I think we have a couple more questions here. So we had another one. Is it possible to get the information for MLA districts for a particular area? I'm in the South Okanagan and the Forest District goes into the Shoe Shop and Thompson area. So Tegan and Angeline, you spoke to this a little bit already. And I think this is posed, the other one overlaying with MLA districts posed by the same person, but if you have more to say on that.
I mean, I don't know, Angeline, if you obviously like we're refining the system. I mean, I'll say also, just to reiterate what Angeline and Des have talked about, we've screened a few hundred alerts right now. I say we, but I have, Angeline, our coworkers, Darwin and Amy. I've done 4. I'm very proud. But there's hundreds more in a backlog, and we're getting more every day. And so, these are going to be constantly updated. I think for now, what I've been doing using the tool in this way is using the map and knowing which areas I'm interested in and pulling alerts that way. And that might be your best path forward right now if you're looking at a specific area. So yeah, for sure in the South Okanagan, where there's so many overlaps in terms of different areas of all, depending on how you look at it, ecosystem type, nations, territories, districts, electoral maps, you name it. So I would use the map, and then like Angeline said, we're going to be refining this tool, and so those functions may change, but for now, that's my advice. And Angeline, any thoughts on that? Okay. Sorry if that's not quite the most helpful thing, but also happy to chat more if you're unsure and as you pull out alerts as you use the tool.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, this is a soft launch, so we're still sort of in the beta phase, and this is great feedback for us understanding and building the use case for this. How do we make this as most useful it can be, and tie it into other data layers like voting districts and other things that will help people, again, kind of situate and feel like they understand where these areas are and what they mean. So that's definitely something that's down the road as we sort of build towards this tool kind of reaching out to the public in a way that is most useful. But we've soft launched now to kind of really engage and understand and build relationships around this so that we can understand how best to shape it towards those needs. So stay tuned.
Amazing. Thank you. I have another one here. What response are you getting from First Nations? And does Forest Eye indicate on which traditional territories the alerts are situated?
Yes, and we actually answered this fully in our Q&A. It's a great question and a really important one. We talked a lot about whether or not we could responsibly identify First Nations territories, because obviously it's very important to us for everyone to know that ultimately everything in the province is on Indigenous land, and to recognize that and to situate ourselves in that. However, the complicated reality is there's not an agreed upon map of where all of the different territories are and how they overlap, and trying to use an imperfect map like the one that we shared, which is a good starting place but has some flaws, could be actually really difficult and create problems for some folks. And that was the feedback we got when we were in the development phase. And so we decided not to use it, to have a blanket statement that, we know this is all Indigenous land. We want everyone to know that. And ultimately, what we're doing at the moment and what we're planning on expanding is doing direct work with nations, with First Nations, with Indigenous people, land defenders, to support them in their work with this tool. And so that might mean that some of, as we expand the tool, that there will be elements of it that won't be as public facing if there's information like proprietary territorial boundaries. It might mean, more direct support for nations in their own use cases, which are different than the campaign that we're running, that Forest Eye is using. And so we have been working with some nations and some folks who've been using elements of this system already in different ways, and we're hoping to expand that. And so I haven't gotten any more substantial feedback yet that I can share with you, but I think we're expecting that we're going to get feedback that's going to change how the tool looks and to improve it and make sure it's aligned with our values and these principles. So again, very much in development. I hope that answers the question. Angeline or Des, feel free to jump in.
Angeline, did you have anything more that you wanted to say on that one?
No, that was great. Thanks, Tegan.
I'll also just post in the chat what Tegan was referring to in terms of it being on the website FAQ. I'm a very visual person, so sometimes that's helpful for me. So I'm just posting it in the chat. And it's also on the FAQ on the website, and I'm going to post the link in the chat as well. I'm getting a little wheel of death on my screen, so I'll do that in a second. But I do have another question. Does the tool only track old growth logging, or does it track clear cut logging and logging in general?
I can answer that one. It only tracks old growth logging. So as we are the single biggest customer now of the lens detection software, which is not really designed to be used across such a broad area, we are easing into the total area of interest that we have the software surveil. So right now it's focused on all of those areas that are overlap between old growth and active and pending logging permits. But in the future, Forest Eye or if it's within this tool or for another use case, could be used to surveil other things across the landscape. And I think that we've really tried to build this tool out so it has that scalability inside it. We also have built it out in a way where we could offer the tool into certain projects for specific activities. It's just putting that all everything across the province all at once potentially meant that we would not be able to launch because it would take so long to figure out how to crunch all that data. So we're doing baby steps. But I think that we all have an eye to what are the other opportunities for this tool and what other things across the landscape are areas of concern that could potentially be rolled in the future, but taking it a little bit slow in order to make sure that we keep the technology up with our hopes and dreams and ideas.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Tegan?
No, just thinking about the massive scale of our hopes and dreams.
Dream big, they say. Yeah, I have another one here from Jackie. You may have already covered, but how soon in a logging event would the alert go out? Angeline?
That's a great question. Actually, and there is a question, an FAQ on the website about this if you want to look at it afterwards as well. But what we see is that our alerts are going to be timed between 1 and 4 weeks after an event, depending on cloud cover and how much imagery was collected, both for confirming the alert within the lens system and then us having enough imagery, both for the lens system to detect a vegetation drop and then for us have enough imagery to confirm the alert. So sometimes these things can be really close. Like I know we saw a road going into a priority deferral area recently that I had flagged and screened. And then we went and checked it a week later and we had all the imagery and the alert showing that area had been cleared. So that was a very quick turnaround, less than a week. But in some cases, it can be upwards of a month. And we're also, because we launched the tool in it, we started running it in March and started doing tests and figuring out all of the bugs and fixes. But we have we have alerts that go back quite a number of years because the tool is now catching up. And so those areas are sometimes an alert will be for an area that was cleared a year ago. And that's the function of building the tool and screening all those alerts, getting rid of that backlog. So we're really only screening what we're seeing in sort of near current time. So you'll see alerts coming out for the next little while, I imagine until the middle of the fall, on areas that have been cleared since January 2020, which actually is a good thing because we really do want to understand what has been the pattern of logging in old growth areas since the old growth strategic review came out and since November 2021 when the deferrals were announced, and then in November 2022 when EB took over as the BC government. And so we are really interested in these longer term timeframes, at least between now and when we put out a more kind of comprehensive analysis in the fall. But I think over time, we expect that alerts will be pretty near term. So between 1 and 4 weeks. And I know that was a little long-winded, but hopefully if you want to catch up on that a little bit more, you can read the FAQ online.
Amazing. Thank you. And Tegan, did you want to add anything? I think that covered it pretty thoroughly for sure.
I think that was great. And yeah, just welcome folks' feedback. And again, I think this is why it's really helpful to be subscribed. We're going to be making an effort to show things that we think are significant, like a road going in recently, and like really analyzing those trends. And so that's also something we're excited to do later in the year, is looking at those trends, like Angeline was saying, and reporting back on them in the context of 3 years gone since the province made this big commitment, and what's really happened on it. So looking forward to bringing that to you.
Yes. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes left. I'm just going to.
There's one more question.
Oh, I just see.
Q&A.
Sorry, just came through. Yes, another one here. Have you considered the possibility that Forest Eye alerts be sent to the Ministry of Forest officers who are responsible for the issuance of the cut blocks and road permits involved in the alerts? They will likely not subscribe to them. And yeah, Tegan?
I'm not so sure that they won't subscribe to them, actually. I think some of them might be. Yes, I mean, I will say we flagged this system for them when it went live, because we wanted them to know about it. And what I think, Angeline, and you can talk more about this, and you have talked about this is information that the province has available and they choose not to make public for, I think, reasons that will surprise no one. But it is, it would be very hard for the province politically to make a case for their old growth successes if they're transparently showing regular clear cutting of old growth forests around BC. And so I think it's likely that there are people from the province, including district offices and the Ministry of Forests, that are subscribed to this tool to see what we're doing and see how close we're getting to the information that they have. And what we really need, like Desiree has talked about, is we really need the elected officials to have, we know that the staff are going to be on this, but we need elected officials to be feeling the heat and to be turning that heat onto staff. And that's where we're going to start seeing, some panic, hopefully, and some action, which is really what we want. We would rather everyone just get along great and do their jobs, but unfortunately we need some real action here. And so that's why we're really encouraging people to email their elected officials, because that's where we've seen change come in the past, is when that pressure is coming from the political level. So yeah, I think you're likely going to see some of those people paying attention to this tool, and we'll be keeping an eye on that as well and making sure they know about it.
Yeah, again, we have used all of their data and nothing but. So it's possible that they already understand that these areas are being logged. We know that forest harvesting permits that were already granted in November 2021 were respected. So that really goes against the intent of the deferral recommendation, which was that areas at risk of harvest should be deferred while old growth strategic review recommendations can be put in place, and a new paradigm for old growth management and protection can be created. So I think it's not a surprise to people working in government that forest harvesting is still happening, and permits are still being issued. And I would say, just to the last question about if deferrals are in place and it has been logged, shouldn't the government be fining these companies? No, the companies are asked to stay out of deferrals based on good faith, and to not stay out of deferrals where they already had active harvesting permits. And so I think there's been a lot of leeway given on that ideal that deferrals should actually be about removing from our harvestable area those most at risk and rare old growth forests that we know we need to have in order to protect old growth forests, not just the structure and the big old trees, but also those old growth ecosystem functions, the water and soil conservation and retention, the a way that old growth forests function as fire blocks and maintain and moisture across forests that help us to mitigate the climate crisis. And I think that what we wanted there with that intent is not something that we're seeing played out. We're seeing a lot of opportunity for harvesting to still continue in a lot of different ways. So there's no legal, the government never made it illegal for forest companies to log in deferrals, especially if they're candidate deferrals and they're not confirmed or official. But they did ask for forest companies to, in good faith, come along on this process. And I think what we're seeing with this tool and what we published in the Tall Talk report that we put out last year was that that's not what happened on the ground. So.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here tonight. We are at the hour, and really appreciate your attendance. And as I put in the chat, we will be sending a link of the recording if you want to share this webinar with your networks. So stay tuned for that. And I also shared the link to the amplification package again, and we will be adding all the links that were shared in this webinar. So if you didn't catch them as they were coming through in the chat, no worries, we will get them to you. Just that one link here, I'll do it one more time just by itself. So the link I just put in the chat is the one where all of the links will live. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, and for this collective work. And yeah, we look forward to continuing in this struggle with you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.